It's time for today's travel and cruise industry news. With the latest from travel and cruises around the world, here's your host, Chillie Falls.
Good morning. Welcome to Travel and Cruise Industry News. Back in the studio for the first time in almost a month. First of all, folks, I apologize for yesterday. The last 3 days has just about done me in, quite frankly. There was no way in the world I had the strength to do a show yesterday. So at the last minute, I had to cancel out. You can hear my voice is gone. Getting back in the cold weather. It was cold in the last 2 days on the Sand Dam and going into Los Angeles. In San Diego. It was cold in San Diego. Then it was, of course, cold when I got to Baltimore last night. And quite frankly, I'm run down. I don't mind admitting it. The cruises itself were fantastic. Of course, I had the added stress of not having my phone. Those of you that missed out on that whole scenario, my Uber driver apparently knocked the phone out of my bag on the way to get on the Sand Dam. He later found it, and between a combination of Cindy Lee, he started calling people when he found the phone, and he realized the ship was gone, plus security wouldn't let him back in. But anyway, he started calling people, and it came up with Cindy Lee, who's a friend of mine, and he dialed that number, and she answered it, and explained the situation, and she said, well, let me call his niece. And so she called Amanda. Amanda called Amigo John up in Crookston, Minnesota. Between John and Nate, everybody's coordinating, trying to get my phone where it needs to be. Nate ended up in Fort Lauderdale, got the phone. Then when he had to leave Fort Lauderdale, he gave it to a friend of his, and she set up with me to be at the airport in Fort Lauderdale at 10 a.m., and she was there. So I got my phone back. In the meantime, there's a couple of things that I found out about this whole scenario from start to finish. Number one, it's not the best idea to sail out of Baltimore in the middle of the winter because it was cold. And it was cold for the first couple of days of the trip. And it was cold the last couple of days of the trip. So yeah, in the middle, it was nice and warm, but it was not on either end of it. That started me down this rabbit hole of being off my game as far as my voice goes. Then, of course, I got off the ship in Baltimore, flew straight to Fort Lauderdale, got on the Sand Dam with no phone, went to 15 days. Here's where the trouble ended up. The last couple of days of the cruise, it was cold. And I got into San Diego, Ubered over to the airport. I was at the airport like 8:30 in the morning. I had a 12-hour layover until my plane flew out of there. Then took the red eye to Fort Lauderdale. Got into Fort Lauderdale at 5:30 in the morning. I met her to get my phone at 10, and I didn't fly out until actually it was closer to 6 o'clock. The flight was delayed. And so I was like 8:30, 9 o'clock getting into Baltimore. And by the time I got to the hotel, I hadn't slept in, 48 hours. And then back in the cold weather. It was just, it's a bad situation. But anyway, I'm back in studio. I apologize again for canceling yesterday's show. And also, I apologize for the scratchy voice. I know I've got to start doing the tea thing and all that business to get my voice back. I'll be on top of that. All right, now to get back to what we're here for. Welcome to Tuesday Travel and Cruise Industry News on this the 21st day of March 2023. The main story, the lead story this morning is Norwegian returns to the e-muster drill. Also today, the headlines, we got Vancouver expecting a record breaker. Symphony of the Sea sets a new record. Ventura rescues 3 from a yacht off Mexico. Simultaneously, the Grand Princess rescues 2 off the coast of Australia. And Frank Del Rio to retire. That and a lot more here at 11 o'clock this morning. All right, folks, today is National California Strawberry Day. Now, I don't suppose if you looked at what does it have a stamp on it that says it's a California strawberry? What if I'm eating a North Carolina strawberry or a Florida strawberry? Who writes these things? National California Strawberry Day. And I'm not saying anything against California strawberries. I love strawberries. I don't care where they're grown. When the season's in, Virginia strawberries are fine too. But anyway, if you're listening via the podcast, welcome aboard. Anytime you want to jump over to see anything in the video feed, there's always a description for you to do just that. The podcast is available anywhere that you find your podcasts, all the big hitters, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You just search for Travel and Cruise Industry News, and up pops the Fat Travel Guy. So anyway, if you're listening, you can always access the podcast via my blog, which is accessadventure.net, or wherever you get your stuff from. All right. We do have quite a bit of news to cover, and I do have a scratchy voice. So we're going to get on with things relatively soon. But first, a word from Scooter Round.
Do you have a bad back, bad hips, bad knees, or any other mobility issues? Think about Scooter Round. For scooters, walkers, wheelchairs, even oxygen needs, delivered right to your cabin. Scooter Round for all your mobility needs on your upcoming cruise.
All right, and Scooter Round, they're the reason I can do what I do, even without a phone, which that was testy. I've got a lot of stuff to write about from this last round of cruises. But at any rate, Scooter Round, that's my strength, And if you're traveling anywhere, whether it's to a land base or on a cruise, call them. I had a scooter in my hotel in New Orleans. I was able to run all over New Orleans. But anyway, Couldn't do it without these folks. All right, I'll be back with today's news after a quick break from one of our network sponsors. All right, getting on with the news today, the lead story comes out of Norwegian. Norwegian Cruise Line has been listening. They've quietly updated the muster drill policy, moving back to the e-muster drill after having resumed the more traditional in-person muster drill late January. One of the things that was probably a poor planning on Norwegian's site was that the first cruise back with the in-person muster drill just happened to be when the hundreds of us were on the bloggers cruise, and everybody got thrown into the big cluster, you know what, having to go back to the old-fashioned muster drill and have a complete waste of time. So everybody that was on that cruise, I think, complained about that. And I mean, it's been happening across Norwegian, not just on the one ship. But anyway, frequent cruisers will be thrilled to learn that the At Your Leisure e-muster drill will be returning this spring as early as April the 1st for some ships. Once on board a cruise, what happens is guests only need to visit their assigned muster station location, which is printed on the ship's card and posted in their stateroom to complete the drill. In total, completing the e-muster drill may take only 20 minutes of the guest's time, which is broken up into pre-cruise videos that you can watch beforehand, and just a few minutes spent on board visiting and checking in at the actual station, which may be located in one of the ship's lounges or restaurants, the casino, or other public spaces. It is so much easier to do the e-muster drill. So, hats off to Norwegian. They're the first one to have left the e-muster and to go back to the e-muster. I hope other cruise lines will do the same thing. So, hats off to Norwegian on this one. All right, story number 2 today has to deal with our friends down in Vancouver. I guess I should say up in Vancouver. When the 2023 Alaska cruise season begins in April, the Port of Vancouver is expecting to be only the start of a record-breaking season with hundreds of ship visits and potentially more than, listen to this number, 1 million passengers that will set sail from the busiest cruise port in Canada. The first ship of the season is Sapphire Princess. You know, I'm going to be on Sapphire Princess in August. Anyway, the Sapphire Princess will be the first to arrive in Canada when she gets there on Wednesday, April the 12th, quickly followed by Norwegian Bliss and Koningsdam on the 13th. The remaining schedule includes Brilliance of the Seas arriving on Sunday, April 23rd, Celebrity Solstice on Wednesday, May the 3rd, Seabourn Odyssey on Thursday, May the 11th, and Disney Wonder on May 15th. So a big year planned for Vancouver. Now that's just in Vancouver, folks. That does not include the people sailing out of Seattle or San Francisco or Los Angeles. They all have ships going to Alaska, but just from Vancouver. Most of the cruises from Vancouver go from Vancouver to Anchorage, Anchorage back to Vancouver. So you've got more time spent in Alaska waters rather than going all the way from Seattle up and back. So you got a little better shot of enjoying the beauty of Alaska. All right, story number 3. Symphony of the Seas is in the process of winding up its transatlantic voyage with a few thousand people on board. It's actually a remarkable set of circumstances, but Symphony of the Seas just arrived in Europe carrying more than 7,000 people. After completing a transatlantic voyage that departed Miami on March the 9th, the Oasis-class ship became the ship carrying the most people on board during a completed transatlantic voyage in peacetime. Now, that's the stipulation, folks, that it's in peacetime, but it did set a new record. 7,604 people on board, 5,350 passengers, 2,224 crew members. It arrived in Malaga, Spain on Sunday, completing the voyage across the Atlantic that will enter the history books. And our own Katie and her friend Angela were, of course, on that sailing. So they're part of history. The Oasis-class ship is now a world record holder for the vessel carrying more people across the Atlantic Ocean than any other vessel in the history in peacetime. After visiting Malaga, Symphony visited Valencia yesterday. Is scheduled to complete the 12-day cruise and arrive in Barcelona today. Symphony of the Seas, built in 2018, was the world's largest of the ship between 2018 and 2022. She will go into dry dock in Cadiz and undergo routine maintenance and class work at the shipyard. Symphony of the Seas will resume operations on April the 16th with a series of 7-night cruises in the Western Caribbean. The Western Mediterranean. Get your seas right, Chillie. While impressive, the transatlantic record set by Symphony of the Seas is not the all-time record for a cruise ship crossing the Atlantic. In July 1943, the Cunard ocean liner Queen Mary set the record for a crossing of the Atlantic, carrying 16,683 cruise members and troops on a single passage. Besides Symphony of the Seas, Royal has 8 other ships in Europe this year. You got Symphony, you got Anthem, you got Odyssey, Serenade of the Seas, Explorer of the Seas, Prince of the Seas, Rhapsody of the Seas, Voyager of the Seas, and Jewel of the Seas. Congratulations to not only Symphony, but to our own Katie as being part of history. How about that? All right, this was a little bit of an unusual story. P&O Cruises and P&O's Ventura rescued 3 people stranded on a sailing yacht yesterday off Mexico. The sailors made a call to the U.S. Coast Guard requesting assistance after the vessel had lost steering ability in the Gulf. On Monday, as the liner was sailing towards New Orleans, they had a distress call from the yacht that had 3 people on it, 1 male and 2 females. Ventura had crossed the boat before, but later they got a call and had to turn the ship back to rescue them. The rescue was completed successfully, and all three are now safe as Ventura resumed her scheduled route to New Orleans. My question on that, this isn't like just one of the rescue boats from Cuba, which is made of sticks and stones and cardboard and whatever else they could, styrofoam, whatever they could put together to make a seaworthy craft. What did they do with the ship? This was a sailing vessel that lost its steerage. So I have no idea what they're going to do for that one. Like to have an answer to that one, though. Now, simultaneously, the Grand Princess over in Australia, the crew of the Grand Princess rescued 2 sailors stranded at sea after their boat suffered engine failure and began taking on water near the coast of Wilson's, Australia. The sailors, a 58-year-old man and a 29-year-old woman, had escaped in a dinghy after activating the emergency beacon. Authorities dispatched a rescue team, which included a helicopter ship located approximately 130 nautical miles away. However, the Grand Princess was the closest vessel and was asked to conduct the rescue. The helicopter guided the cruise ship toward the dinghy, and the sailors were retrieved from the dinghy with the help of a rescue boat, albeit with a minor incident where one of the passengers fell overboard. So 2 rather unusual rescues at the same time. And finally, this morning, in the way of news, Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings announced that Frank Del Rio has decided to retire and step down from his position as the company's president and chief executive officer and from its board of directors effective June 30th, according to a press release. Del Rio will serve as a consultant capacity as a senior advisor to the board through 2025. Harry Summer, who has served as president and CEO of NCL since 2020, has been appointed to succeed Del Rio and will also join the company's board effective July the 1st. David Herrera, who has served as Chief Consumer Sales and Marketing Officer, will succeed Sumner as president of NCL effective April the 1st. Del Rio's well-deserved retirement is the culmination of a remarkable career spanning 3 decades in the cruise industry. At times, he's been a very controversial figure, especially when it comes to nepotism. But he's done a magnificent job in steering the Norwegian Cruise Holdings through the pandemic. All right, that's going to wrap up the news portion of today's show. Let's jump over and see who's in the chat room today. Kenneth's with us. Hey, Kenneth. Was there a show yesterday? I thought I looked, but I didn't see you. No, there wasn't. At the last minute, I had to cancel it out. Mike says no show yesterday. Cindy's with us. Good morning, Cindy. Good morning, Chillie. Get well soon. Thank you. Yeah, and I don't feel bad. It's just my voice is gone to crap. So that's that. That we start in on the tea business, and yeah, it helps me to get some sleep. So I was able to sleep last night. Blaine's with us from Raleigh Creative Travel. Good morning, Blaine. Hot Air Tom is here again. Tom, what can I say? Tom grabbed me a hotel room in Baltimore. There's no way in the world I could have driven home once I got there. But then even by the next morning after I slept some, I was just in no shape for doing a show. I struggled to get home. And that was only, a 4.5 hour drive. But anyway, Hot Air Tom comes through for me once again. Nikki's with us. A chilly 66 degrees in Jacksonville this morning. Yeah, that's, it was 24 here when I got up today. So I'm back into the cold weather and just not ready for cold weather. Yo, Brooklyn in the house. Hi, Eddie. Eddie says he's fuzzing and lurking. Good morning, everyone. I'm here freezing. Anyway. Hot Air Tom says, being 10 years younger than Chillie, I knew there was no way he would be fit to drive after a long flight across country. No way I could do that. Yeah, and Hot Air Tom, you're absolutely right. And it just fell into place where I had to do all that damn time in the airports. That's what killed me. Actually, I didn't do bad on either flight, but it was the sitting around an airport, not being able to easily get to a bathroom or easily get to someplace to eat or drink. And the two airlines that I used, JetBlue does not have a lounge in San Diego. Spirit does not have a lounge in Fort Lauderdale. My friend Patrick, that was on his show, a couple months ago, sent me a message that there is a independent lounge at the San Diego airport that was reasonably near where I was, and I asked for directions to that lounge and was told that, sorry, it's closed for maintenance. So that didn't help me at all. Tell us about the seats on your flights. JetBlue was probably decent. JetBlue was much better than Spirit. I had more room. When I book a flight, I always book the outside seat. So my left leg, which I have the most amount of trouble with on my mechanical issues, that is next to the aisle. So I do have a chance to stretch it out. However, the JetBlue seemed to have more room just underneath the seats. So, and then the first Spirit flight, they tried to force me into a window seat. And I said, no. That's why I book an aisle seat, because, I can't be stuffed into a window seat and not being able to move my leg at all. And they said, well, you can't have your oxygen then. What do you mean I can't have my oxygen? It has to be put up in storage. What? Yeah, that was what they said. Now, the Spirit flight from Fort Lauderdale to Baltimore, they didn't tell me that. So I had my oxygen with me, normal seat, I booked it. So that was just weird. But anyway, it was a tough 2 days, basically, that I had no sleep. because of 2 12-hour periods in the airports. So again, folks, my apologies for yesterday. I'm going to Nourishment today. By the way, I take another COVID test just to make sure, that this is just, a laryngitis kind of thing. So Cindy says that was a crazy travel schedule. Yeah, it was awful, just awful. And Nate's giving me hell. Next time, let me book your flights. Oh, okay, you want to book my flights? Go right ahead. Anyway, that's going to wrap me up for today, guys. I promise, folks, I'll get back to normal. Maybe another nice long nap today and another good night's sleep tonight. And I'll be back to my fighting weight come tomorrow. Yeah, I don't count on it. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap me up today. As always, stay safe, stay healthy. Think about cruising. And one day soon, excuse me, we'll all get together on the high seas. Have a fantastic day, everybody. See you tomorrow.
I regularly post videos on all facets of the travel and cruise industry. So if you like to keep up with the latest in cruise ships, ports of call, cruises themselves, Chillie chats, and travel and cruise industry news, just hit the little subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner. Hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when a new video is up or we go live. This video was produced by Chillie's Cruises.